Stop accidentally making good pictures. Look at that. Don't be afraid to destroy your precious underpainting. Do you want to learn 12 different fail-proof compositions? You'll put an X there. There's our X. We want to stay out of the center. Little by little, sometimes you work, you stop thinking about your composition, and you'll end up done, and your subject will be in the middle. So even though you put an X there, learning composition requires more than just putting an X so you don't center your subject. I'm pastelist Avon Waters. Welcome to the Wet Pastel channel, but today I'm talking about composition, fail-proof compositions. You'll have fewer scrapers, fewer wipe-offs, and more successful paintings. Composition is like the foundation of a building. The building aesthetics, it may look like a beautiful building, but if it falls down in a few years or the roof sags, it doesn't have a good foundation. It may be beautiful, but it won't hold together. The same is true with your paintings. Once you learn the secrets of picture design, you will be able to create fail-proof compositions. And then the rest is up to you if you get the color right, the value, and all those other aspects that we artists have to worry about. Today I'm going to first start out showing you the root design that most compositions are based on. There are thousands of picture designs and foundations, but there's only about 15 to 20 true compositional designs that, when added all together, create many thousands of painting options for the artist. But today you're going to learn one. So stop accidentally making good pictures. This is a super thing that it took me 6 years to learn. I'm going to share one of those designs, one of those 15 to 20 designs. One that has 12 foolproof composition options for you. After I show and demonstrate that one picture design with the 12 compositional options, then I'm going to use that design and paint a landscape, a memory study, and show you how to apply that picture design. This is a super opportunity to build your art on a great foundation. In the beginning, I accidentally made good pictures, like 1 time out of 10. This is one of 3 videos that I told my students that I would make this year, and by the end of the year I'll have a downloadable course that everybody can use. So let's get started. There are 12 possibilities with this one picture design. Some people call it the rule of thirds. I hate to use the word rule, but I'll slip every now and then and say, oh, the rule of thirds. There are no rules in picture design. There are just these guidelines. First of all, divide your paper into thirds. I happen to like square format, but this works equally as well on rectangular formats, long and skinny. Once you divide this into 3 equal parts, horizontally and vertically, this picture design has a ton of flexibility, and many of the designs that I plan to teach in the future and in future videos, or a course by the end of 2025, an online course, I'll have, they stem from this very first understanding of what they call the thirds. You break any canvas into thirds, and where these intersecting points are here are your centers of interest. Okay, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 picture designs just with those 4 points. You put a center of interest here, here, or here, or here, and you've already eliminated this tendency of our human minds to want to center things in the middle. Composition is the ability to control the viewer's eye and hold their interest. Anytime you have a blank canvas like this, the canvas, the edges, where it touches the wall, where it's on your easel, our eyes are directed to these outer edges. Until you put something in there, and here's our third marks on this, I'm going to do a memory study from a landscape and use this principle to illustrate in a memory study. Hopefully it'll turn out. Sometimes these memory studies don't, but I do this often in my in-person workshops. But I'm dividing a canvas first into those thirds. By thirds, I mean this is a third. You're thinking fourths. Wait a minute, that's fourths. This is 1/3, this is 1/3, this is 1/3. This is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It just so happens to look like the squares are in fours. So these are the points of interest that I have as an artist to decide where to put my subject. Now, as I said, this is extremely vertical. There are 12 possibilities, maybe more, but I'll point out 12 possibilities using this technique. You've already seen these 4, okay? Now, another possibility is this. There's number 5. If you had somebody standing here and going off into the ocean this direction and the landscape going off here, but the person of interest is standing here, that's number 5. They could be standing here looking this way, that's number 6. It could be a tall tree that is on this is maybe the foreground, that's number 7. The tree could be over here, it's number 8. You could have something in this plane, number 9, number 10. You could be this way, 11. You could be this way, 12. There's 12 possibilities of the way that you could put your subject just by breaking this piece of paper or your canvas into thirds. So this is an extremely flexible, easy beginner's design, picture design that will get you away from, and I've told people, and I've done it myself early on when I was painting, I would put an X right in the middle of my canvas, and that reminded me not to put my center of interest there. So if all you do is you put an X in the middle of your canvas, then you're ahead of everybody else. But this is the first design you need to learn, because many designs that I'll talk about go from this. Even when I take pictures, I'm currently involved in a glacial lakes project, and you'll notice that when I frame my pictures to do drawings from later or to do studies from, look where that horizon line is. That horizon line is going right across the top. Look where that water coming down this edge ends up. It's really close to this. If I were to paint from this, I probably would move that little bit of light water right down in here a little lower so it falls in this plane. So there's 12 different picture design possibilities there. I pulled one out of a magazine. This is Plein Air magazine, and look at this image. Look at that image of that tree. Okay? Look where that tree goes. Look where that horizon is. That's the possibility of the tree here, the horizon here. That's one of those 12 possibilities. Here's another one. This is almost like Rothko with color fields. But it's a landscape. Look at the 2/3 above. That horizon is the sky. 1/3 is below. That's this picture plane here. That's that design. If I wanted to do something similar to that, I would be able to come in here and just color in something like that. Put my darker tones down in here. Now put a landscape down in here. The land. And look what happens if I take that 1/3 mark and I put some light coming through the clouds and coming across that landscape. I am using that same design to create many different picture design options. Let me get started on something here. Well, before I do that, let me show you how I can move that center of interest around. Okay, I pulled some pastels out of my box that are in the 1 and 2 range. Turn these to gray and then the darker end of the gray scale. So we got our 1/3, we got our 2/3 division. Remember, we divided this thing into, and there's 4 centers of interest. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4 planes. 1, 2, 3. So I got 2 up here and 1 down here. And by dividing any canvas and remembering how to break that into thirds is your very first real step towards future designs. Because these are so dark of colors, I could easily turn this into something more eerie for a different mood. Here's that center space. If I had light coming through clouds in here, going across this 1/3, I have used this center point as a reference to kind of come down. Let's say this was water instead of land. That reflection is going down into that area. If I didn't want to do that, I've got the option to do it over here. I could have a light spot there, get that covered up. I could have a light spot there and have it go across the horizon. Maybe behind a row of trees there's a little light reflecting back in there. And you could play with the values and get different things happening in that. I don't want it there. Let's cover that up. Back to our 1/3, 2/3, getting a little muddy, but still I think you can see the concepts here. Let's say we had a barn or a house catching some light in this area. The front of the barn or the house goes along this 1/3 line this way, and the 1/3 line, that point of interest that we've made. Remember that? I'm sideways here, so my drawing may be way off, but I think you're going to get the picture. So you can see how just breaking that plane up into thirds, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, using those intersecting lines that force the eye out of the center. We stay out of the center, and you're on the way to a good composition. This is the easiest thing for beginners to learn. So if you just start thinking in terms, even when you look at photographs in magazines, you start thinking in terms of how that artist depicted some of those images. I can come along here and create more interest that way. It could be a house, it could be a barn. If you're into cityscapes, you can have buildings that are up this way and that light between 2 rows of buildings coming right down into this 1/3 area and reflecting off the street if it was wet pavement. You can have a crosswalk, dark pavement down here and a crosswalk that breaks right on that line. Those are the things. Start looking in your magazines and look and see how the artists have divided up that space. And as again, I'm just drawing sideways here, so I know my perspective's a little off there, but I think you're getting the idea of how you can create these points of interest. You get too many. If you try to use all 4 of these areas of interest, then the mind starts going, wait a minute, what's of interest? This, 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 or this? So you don't want to emphasize 2 of these points. You want to emphasize 1 of these points, and you can keep that subdued by moving the light around a little bit on these other areas. This is really getting muddy now, but I think you see how I'm going to now illustrate that this, with a memory drawing, you'll see how I'm going to use those points of interest, those 1, 2, 3 points with the 1/3 breakup in this memory drawing. So let me get started on that. I'm going to decide to put something bright in this area. This is just a place marker. I often do this. If you've watched my other videos, you've seen how I will put place setters in. Normally I work dark to light, but because I want that place setter there and stay out of the center, I will stick this kind of pale yellow in there for now, and I'm going to break this other part up. I'm going to do 2/3 sky and 1/3 bottom. for right now. Could turn into something else, but that's the direction I'm going. And again, I'm working in the value range. You turn this to grays, and they would be about a 6 or a 7 out of a 10 layered grayscale. We'll rub that in. Try to get it. This is just a drawing paper I've got down there. So nothing special. These are 8x8 drawing papers. And I'm just filling in the tooth by rubbing this in, just blocking in. So something just as simple as this. You could see how this could turn into a seascape or something like that. I don't know yet what it'll be. I'm just playing. I'm having fun. The violets and the blues that I've picked here. Oh look, I'm getting I'm making a mess here. Let's see here. I'm getting some other colors in there. Enjoying it. I just like to have fun. Now it's turning into a landscape instead of a seascape. Who knows? Like I said, it's a memory drawing. Sometimes these work out and sometimes they don't. There's our X. We want to stay out of the center. You'll put an X there, and little by little sometimes you work, you stop thinking about your composition, and you'll end up done, and your subject will be in the middle. So even though you put an X there, it can happen. These oranges will mix with this blue, give me a little more gray down in here. Up in here, we'll get them covered up again. I'm looking for some gray values. Oh, look at that beautiful gray. Oh, it's predominantly blue still, but that orange and the blue really grays down beautifully. Look at that. Look at that. And because I've used gray down in here, it's really making those colors pop. But we need to tone that down. We want our center of interest to be, in this case, I'm using color to draw some interest in there. That's a little dark. Let me get a lighter blue. And I'll have to reestablish that sky, but this is where that sky comes up over our heads. So I want a little more intense color when I'm done up in here. But for right now, I got to gray it down so I get that background going back into the distance. Art to me, if it's not destructive, if I'm not destroying something or recreating it, I'm just not having as much fun as if I try to copy something. So these memory exercises are great. But again, this is a video about composition. So now I've started to fill in the tooth of that drawing paper. And look at that. Don't be afraid to destroy your precious underpainting. But composition, 1/3, 2/3, and look, I pulled some trees over into here. It's not going to be a center of interest, but I'm using that 1/3 space with this shape in here. And again, this is going to be my highlighted area. I've pulled a little more. I want to reestablish that. Don't know what it'll turn into. And I'm going to pull some of that up into here, into these grays. Lighten them up a little bit, but look at that. If I wanted to have water down here, I could just, here's my 1/3 mark in here. I could just get some light down in there too. That's too intense of a yellow for a finished painting, but it reestablishes my 1/3, 2/3 composition that we started with the drawing. I do a ton of reading art history. Art history is one of the most amazing things for me, and it's helped my art so many. And I remember when I was in art school, I remember how we were forced to take art history, and we artists were like, oh gosh, why do we have to do that? I want to learn to paint. I want to learn to draw. I want to do this. I want to do that. But I tell you, when it comes to composition, the art history classes I took, and the way the instructors talked about the past, and the way artists from hundreds of years ago began to understand perspective. I learned more out of my art history classes about composition than I ever did with my studio classes. My studio classes were all about technique, how you mix paint, how you do this or that. If they talked about composition, I missed it. And I actually had difficulty with composition until I spent about 6 years just studying all the different compositions I could find. And I've come up with at least 15 or 20 that I teach in my workshops. And composition is not something that is hundreds and thousands of years old. Composition, the way that we artists look at it today, is totally different than the way the Greeks looked at it. The Greeks looked at composition mathematically. They had, a lot of people think that the idea of breaking a canvas into thirds, or the 1 to 3 ratio, was something that the Greeks developed, and the Egyptians. But that's not the case. If you look at an old Leonardo da Vinci drawing, you'll see where they had drawn X's and lines and created these geometric calculations to figure out what composition, what was working, what wasn't. They were trying to understand composition. And in the process, in the Renaissance, especially the Dutch still life painters, they started to develop understanding of how breaking things into triangles and pyramids was a way to draw the eye into still lifes. And sometimes the landscape painters or those still life painters would go outside and find opportunities to create those pyramids and triangles in their drawings. So composition is really an ongoing, very young development of art. We're only looking at it several hundred years. When the 18 and 25,000 years ago, when those drawings were made by people in caves in Spain and France, those compositions were simple. There was no horizon in many of those. Those animals were in a parade. Those animals were the center of attention. There were no humans in those early cave drawings. They don't know quite what those drawings represented, whether they were a way for shamans. And many of the artists in tribes, Native American tribes, Frank Waters, no relation to me, that I know of, Frank Waters studied Native American Indian tribes, and those tribes often made the person who was artistic in the village, they were the shamans sometimes, because they could draw on the animal hides and the teepees, and they could create meaning that others didn't understand. We artists are always and have always been interpreting the world around us. So composition is hugely important, but it's a growing relatively new area of study for us. Only a few hundred years old for the compositions that we have developed to this day. And I always try to teach 15 to 20 in my workshops, and that has always been a popular workshop. It's when I teach that. So I'm going to try to develop where I can teach it online. You can get that information rather than bits and pieces like you do by following my videos. My videos are for all my workshop students, but I've found that there's so many more people interested in some of the stuff I'm doing with wet pastels that you're all welcome, folks. And I love feedback and comments to what you would like to see. I'm trying to make the videos a little more interesting, better, but you know, what happens, happens. I'm having fun. That's all that matters to me. At my age, if I'm not having fun, then I'm not doing it right. So you can see I'm still trying to maintain that. It all blended together, and by me now putting over those values and those colors and hues that I put in those trees, kind of hard to believe this thing started out almost as a seascape, isn't it? Mixing these oranges with that gives me a little more earthy of a tone down through here. But again, I've got the 1/3 and the 2/3 area with my center of interest on that intersecting line there. Just very simple composition, to be on a hazy day with light coming behind. Video tends to make some of these yellows and yellow oranges fade out, but there's some nice things happening in the close-up of this. And this could be a really hot spot, one of those hazy summer days where the sun gets behind that haze and you can look up and you can see it. And if I come down from that and create a little light behind these trees off in the distance, and any grasses up along there are going to catch some of that light. And of course I'm in that 1/3 area again. Alright? It's just such a beautifully simple little concept, dividing that canvas into thirds to begin with. At least 12 different picture designs are derived just from that one exercise. Try it. Normally, if I was doing wet pastels, I would put a little more texture on here. But again, this is all about learning basic composition. And once you learn these thirds, breaking that into thirds and staying away from that center point, you are on your way for the future images that I'm going to talk about. And by the end of 2025, I should have a course that you can use, have access to the rest of your life, and be able to go back and study these things at your own pace, not just follow me along. But you're more than welcome to invite me to your community and set up a workshop. I'll do that too. I'm headed to Minnesota this year, maybe North Carolina. I'm doing demos in North Carolina and on the West Coast for pastel societies, doing those online. So, just having fun. Might not show up there, but I'm in the 1/3 intersect, and I got a really pale yellow here. And I'm going to try to make it appear like that sun. I talked earlier about how that sun could be behind some hazy summer, high humidity clouds. I live in the Midwest, and those folks that live in the South can understand this. If you live down in the Southeast, there are some days that the humidity, you just feel like you can cut the air with a knife. It's just so humid. There are many days where that sun just gets up there and it's just, oh my gosh, it's sweltering. Just sweltering. You feel like you're breathing water, that you're underwater breathing. And it's just oppressive summer heat. I lived on the West Coast for a while. I lived in San Francisco Bay Area, and I've got a studio in Bogota, Colombia, and those areas have dry air, and the temperatures are moderate with the prevailing winds, and it's just totally a different feel. Having fun. Have fun, folks. Have fun. As I said, if I was using wet pastel techniques, and this video was about that, we would be going over this and creating much more textures. I want to put this kind of salmon color in there. The salmon color has kind of a little bit of orange in it. And orange has yellow in it, and those trees have a violet in it. I'm kind of having fun with that. This is almost one of those, this is a Diana Townsend. I love her tirage, the things she developed for Wolf Kahn. But this is one of those fluorescent ones. It's not part of the Kahn set. Look at that. What are we? We're in that 1/3 line. So I went from using just a dot where the lines intersect to using this whole 1/3 area over in here. And you don't have to be precise on this 1/3. This 1/3 area could be a little off. You just don't want it to go in the center. You just want to stay away from centering that. Now, people say there's a rule there. There's not a rule. It's easier to draw people's attention. Actually, one of the hardest things you can do is break the so-called rule of not centering your piece. I put subjects in the center and made them work. It's difficult, but it works. That's not what this is about. This is about finding that area where things will work for you using a canvas broken up into thirds. Yeah, there we turned it into water again. All right. I think I'm going to stop there. I think you've got the idea of how you could take something from the thirds, break that any canvas shape. This is square, works on rectangle again, it works on rectangle, long and skinny and narrow, you name it, whatever shape, break it into thirds and start from there. Find your center of interest and place it in one of those intersecting lines or along a 1/3 mark, vertical or horizontal, and you've got 12 different picture designs just by knowing that one opportunity and one design using thirds. We'll stop there today. I hope that you got something out of that. If you are, please hit the like button so others can find this content more easily. As I said, you have basically 12 different options with this one picture design. The next video, this is the first out of 3. The next video, we're going to go into another popular design that you can combine that design with this one and create even more options. Mathematically, and we artists, for gosh sakes, we don't know anything about math, but mathematically, when you learn just 3 or 4 designs and you combine them in different ways, these picture designs, you have hundreds of different ways to develop each painting or image that you create. So stick with me. Next week we'll have another one with this. And until then, happy painting, everybody. Bye-bye.